Marcus Borg, in his book The Last Week, speaks about that moment from when Christ came into Jerusalem, as we know as Palm Sunday, to his moment of death and resurrection. And in this book, The Last Week, he speaks about how on the day that Christ came into Jerusalem, celebrating what we know as Palm Sunday, on the other side of town, Pontius Pilate would have come in with his horses and chariots to quell any form of resistance amongst the Jews. And he speaks about the two forces that come, the peace of Christ and the so-called peace of the Romans. Jesus Christ coming to bring in the peace that passes all understanding, the peace of a Savior, the peace of the Son of God. And on the other side, this to bring about political peace, or to quell any form of the zealots or those who were wanting to resist Roman rule. And so Pontius Pilate would have come in on the one side of Jerusalem over Passover, over the very same weekend, in a show of force, saying, beware any zealots or anyone wanting to cause an uprising against Rome. The might and the power of Rome is here in Jerusalem over the Passover, while 2.5 million people or so are gathering in Jerusalem at the time of the Passover. So on the one side you got the peace of Christ, and the other side you got the peace of Rome coming in. One peace imposed by military rule and by dictatorship and by violence, the other about peace being brought about by a suffering Christ, Christ who's prepared to bring about love and sacrificial love. I wonder if those same forces, as we find them, weren't in that moment of crucifixion, where the forces of evil and the force of death was in that moment, in this battle against the force of God, as Jesus Christ breathed his last breath. And then again over that 3-day battle, as Christ rises from the dead, again this battle between life and death, this battle between these two forces, the force of God and the force of the world, or the force of God and the force of the enemy or of evil, up against each other. And ultimately the story of Easter is that God has the ultimate victory no matter what. It's a reminder that there will always be different forces at work. In our own personal life, there are these forces at work within us, and Paul speaks about that. I just so longingly, desperately want to do good, but I find myself doing evil. Again, these two forces opposing each other. In our personal lives, we find it in our families, we find it in work, and right now in South Africa, we find this battle going on even on a political level. There will always be these two forces at work. And you and I, those who follow Christ, those who celebrate the resurrected Christ, remember that the will and the power of God is always going to be the victor. It might not seem like it now, as it didn't seem like it on Friday, but by Sunday it was very clear. And so sometimes you and I catch ourselves in that place between 3 days, between Friday and Sunday. Sometimes it may even feel that you're on the losing end. Sometimes it might feel that the power and the force of the one is so great, as on a worldly level it must have seemed. If you, on the one side, if you looked at the Romans and Pontius Pilate coming in with swords and shields and chariots, and next you see Jesus on a donkey. I mean, from a worldly perspective, it is almost absurd. There's absolutely no doubt who's going to win that battle from a worldly perspective. But at the end of the day, we know that God is victorious. We know that Jesus Christ is victorious. But sometimes we're caught in the battle between Friday and Sunday, somewhere in there, and it's confusing, and we feel lost and we feel uncertain, because it seems as if the odds are stacked up against us. But don't ever be disillusioned. Don't ever lose hope. Don't ever give up, because you see, no matter what it seems like for you right now this Easter, through God there is victory. Get through the 3 days, because on the other side of the 3 days there is an empty tomb. On the other side of the 3 days there is just linen that's just lying on the floor there, because Christ has resurrected from the dead, and he is victorious, and he will come again. So the Easter message this Easter for 2016 is do not despair, do not lose hope, even if you're in the midst of the 3 days, even in the middle of that moment. And as Christ came in to Jerusalem on a donkey from the one side, and the emperor came in on the other side with a show of physical and armed and political force, in God's mind, there was never any doubt as to where the victory was going to be. Never doubt. Trust that message for you this Easter, that God has no doubt as to who will win the victory in your life. Trust God, believe God, and be victorious in God and because of God. I want to close off by just saying this, and this is my own interpretation. I'm wondering if at the end, as Jesus came into Jerusalem, if there wasn't almost a bit of sarcasm, a bit of you come in on a white horse on the other side, I'm going to come in on a donkey. There was like just this moment of almost like teasing the political power of almost like, in fact, almost making fun of the political power of the day. Almost sort of, you come at us with what you've got, I'll come on a donkey, and we will see at the end who is victorious, because all that you have is nothing compared to what God has. So this Easter, may God be with you, may God strengthen you, may God bring you peace, but most of all, may God bring you victory. Amen.